So I want to start with something that happened this week that almost nobody is connecting to the bigger picture. China just called for the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened. That sounds like a reasonable diplomatic statement. It sounds like China being responsible. It sounds like Beijing playing the role of the mature adult in a dangerous situation. But here's the thing. This was the first time Xi Jinping has ever made that call publicly. In over 65 days of war, China stayed silent on Hormuz. And then suddenly last week, Xi spoke. Why now? Why this week specifically? Because when you understand why China made that move at this exact moment, the entire Middle East suddenly looks different. The war looks different. The ceasefire looks different. And the Trump-Xi summit scheduled for May 14th looks completely different. Today, I want to show you what China is actually doing in this war. Not what they are saying publicly.
What they are actually doing, and why that one move calling for Hormuz to reopen may be the most strategically calculated thing any leader has done in this entire conflict. Stay with me, because this is not a story about diplomacy. This is a story about power. Now, before I explain what China is doing, I need to give you the baseline. I need to show you the situation China walked into when this war started on February 28th. When America and Israel launched strikes on Iran, China faced what strategists call a strategic dilemma, a situation where every option available to you has serious costs. On one side, Iran is China's most important energy partner in the Middle East. China buys roughly 90% of Iran's oil exports. That relationship saves China nearly $4 billion annually because Iran sells at a discount due to sanctions. Iran is also a critical node in China's Belt and Road Initiative.
China built a railway through Central Asia into Iran specifically to create a trade route that bypasses the Strait of Malacca. That railway, by the way, was damaged by Israeli strikes during the war. So when Iran gets hurt, China gets hurt directly. On the other side, China's single most important economic priority right now is not Iran. It is the United States. China is trying to escape what economists call the middle income trap. It needs export growth. It needs access to American markets. The trade truce reached late last year was fragile and precious. And Xi Jinping's meeting with Trump on May 14th is, according to Chinese sources, a singular opportunity to stabilize the relationship with America for the long term. So here is China's dilemma in plain terms. If China openly supports Iran, it risks destroying the Trump summit and the trade relationship. If China abandons Iran, it loses its cheapest oil supplier and signals to every country in the global south that China will not protect its partners when America applies pressure. This is an almost impossible position to be in. And what China has done in response is one of the most sophisticated pieces of strategic maneuvering I have seen in modern geopolitics. Let me break it down because there are 4 things China is doing simultaneously, and they look contradictory on the surface, but they are actually a single coherent strategy. The first thing China is doing is providing covert military support to Iran while maintaining public deniability. American intelligence assessed that China was preparing to deliver new air defense systems to Iran, specifically shoulder-fired anti-air missile systems known as MANPADS. These are the exact weapons that shot down an American F-15 over Iran. Trump warned publicly that there would be consequences if China went through with the shipment. But notice what Trump did not do. He did not name Xi Jinping directly. He left a diplomatic exit open. And China, rather than openly defying that warning, is reportedly routing shipments through third countries to mask their origin. China is helping Iran fight, but it is doing it in a way that gives both sides the ability to pretend it is not happening. This is not weakness. This is precision. China is threading a needle that almost no other country in the world has the sophistication to thread. The second thing China is doing is positioning itself as the indispensable mediator. China helped broker the fragile ceasefire that paused the fighting in early April. China presented itself to the world as the responsible party that brought the two sides back from the brink, and the world largely accepted that framing. China's global standing, according to multiple international observers, has been significantly enhanced by this war, not because China fought, because China appeared to be the only major power genuinely working toward peace. Meanwhile, America is seen as the aggressor, Russia is seen as a supporter of Iran, and China is seen as the stabilizing force. That is extraordinary. China is covertly helping Iran fight America while publicly being credited as the peacemaker. That is not a contradiction. That is the strategy. The third thing China is doing is using the war to strengthen its negotiating position with Trump without appearing to do so. Chinese sources have told CNN that Beijing views the Iran war as having strengthened its position heading into the May 14th summit. Here is the logic. America needs this war to end before the economic damage becomes politically unmanageable. Gas prices are above $4 nationally. Fertilizer prices are squeezing American farmers. Asian governments are urging energy conservation. The economic pressure from Hormuz being effectively closed is real, and it is building. China knows that if it can help create the conditions for a peace deal, Trump comes to Beijing as someone who needs something. And when you come to a negotiation needing something from the other side, your leverage is reduced. At the same time, China is being careful not to push too hard. One Chinese source put it precisely. If Trump attacks Iran again after visiting China, it would look like China had abandoned Iran. And Trump is, as the source said, very clever. He is not directly confronting China. He is surrounding China's partners one by one. Venezuela first, Iran now. Each one clips China's wings in different regions. China understands the game, and it is playing it with extraordinary care. The fourth thing China is doing is the most important and the most underreported. China is locking in structural economic advantages that will outlast this war regardless of how it ends. Even as the war continues, China is still importing Iranian oil. The crude is being transferred ship to ship near Indonesia and Malaysia before moving on to Chinese refineries. China has continued buying sanctioned Iranian oil throughout the conflict. As long as China buys Iranian oil, Iran has revenue. As long as Iran has revenue, Iran can keep fighting. China is not just supporting Iran diplomatically, it is financially sustaining Iran's ability to resist. And here is the part that changes the whole picture. If America wins this war and Iran falls, China loses its cheapest oil supplier, but China keeps its relationship with America and the Gulf states. If America loses this war or withdraws without achieving regime change, Iran remains standing. Iran is now economically locked into China for the long term. China has preferential access to Iranian energy for decades, and China emerges from this war as the dominant external power in the region, not through military force, not through invasion, but through patient economic positioning. Think about what that means. China wins whether Iran wins or loses. As long as Iran does not completely collapse, China comes out ahead. That is what they are calling strategic hedging. But it is more than hedging. It is a masterclass in non-linear power projection. Now let me tell you why Xi's call to reopen the Strait of Hormuz was so significant and why I believe it changes the trajectory of this war. Before last week, Xi had never publicly called for Hormuz to reopen. China had blocked a UN resolution on Hormuz, saying it was one-sided. China's ambassador said the draft failed to capture the full picture. China was publicly protecting Iran's position on the strait. Then suddenly, Xi makes the call. Why? The timing is everything. The Trump summit is 12 days away. The ceasefire is fragile and breaking down. Iran has rejected the American peace proposal. A resumption of full-scale fighting before the summit would create enormous pressure on Xi. Here is what Xi's statement actually communicates, and I want to be precise here because this is subtle. It is not a message to America. America already wants Hormuz open. It is a message to Iran. Xi is telling the Iranian leadership, privately and through this public signal simultaneously, that China needs the strait open for the summit to proceed smoothly, that China's interests require a pause, that Iran should not escalate before May 14th, and Iran will listen, because Iran cannot afford to lose China's support. China buys 90% of Iranian oil. China is the financial lifeline that is keeping the Iranian economy from complete collapse. When China sends a signal, Iran hears it. This is what makes China's position so extraordinary in this war. China has leverage over both sides. America needs China to help manage Iran. Iran needs China to survive economically, and China is using both of those leverage points simultaneously. So what does this mean for the Middle East going forward? I want to give you 3 specific conclusions that I believe the evidence points to clearly. First conclusion, the Trump-Xi summit on May 14th will produce a framework for winding down the Iran war. Not a peace treaty, not a final settlement, but a framework that gives America a path to de-escalation and gives China formal recognition as a key mediator. This is what both sides need. Trump needs an off-ramp that he can present as a win. Xi needs a summit that demonstrates China is an indispensable global power. Second conclusion, Iran will not be destroyed by this war. It will be transformed by it. The IRGC is now more firmly in control of Iran than any civilian government has been in decades. The war has militarized Iranian politics in a way that will last for a generation, and Iran is now more economically dependent on China than at any point in its history. Iran is becoming, in practical terms, a junior partner in China's strategic architecture in the Middle East. Third conclusion, the Middle East is entering a Chinese era of influence, not through military bases, not through invasions, but through the one thing China has been building for 30 years, economic dependency. China's Belt and Road connects to Iran. China buys Gulf oil. China trades with Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and Iran simultaneously. No other external power has economic relationships across all sides of this conflict, and that gives China a form of influence that military power alone cannot replicate. America used military power to try to control the Middle East, and it is discovering, as Britain discovered before it and Rome discovered before Britain, that military control and actual influence are not the same thing. China never sent a single soldier into this war, and it may emerge from it as the most influential external power in the region. Let me end with this. In the game of chess, the most dangerous piece is not the one that attacks directly, it is the one that controls the board from a distance, that shapes the positions of all the other pieces without ever exposing itself to capture. China is playing that piece in this war. And while Washington watches troop movements and missile counts and ceasefire timelines, Beijing is quietly repositioning itself into a relationship with the Middle East that will outlast this war, outlast the next American administration, and outlast the current structure of global power. That is what China's unthinkable move actually means. Not a diplomatic statement, not a peace call, a declaration made in the quietest possible voice that the Middle East's future runs through Beijing. That is the analysis for today. If you think I am wrong, I want your argument in the comments, not your reaction, your argument, because that is what this channel is about. I will see you in the next one.